You should try to pick up a problem which is like in these premier competitions with prize money, because they have the most serious competitors against you, and you will get to learn a lot from the notebooks or kernels that are shared. You will get to learn a lot from different discussions. You will learn a lot by failing in those competitions. So yeah, be ready to be ready to accept that you can fail. You maybe you won't win a medal because it's your first competition. Maybe you will win a medal and that will boost your confidence. But don't get intimidated by others doing well in the competition. And when the competition is finished, people share their solutions. So try to go through them and implement them on your own. And you can still submit to the competition after the competition ends. And that way you will learn a lot of new things.
Hello everyone, Ken here, back with another awesome interview for you. Today I had the pleasure of speaking with Abhishek Thakur. Abhishek was the first ever 3-time and 4-time Kaggle Grandmaster. He also has a YouTube channel where he produces really good tutorial content, and he recently published a book about how to approach almost any machine learning problem. I'll leave more links to Abhishek's content below and above. I'll also try to link his YouTube channel. In our interview, we talk about how to dominate the Kaggle platform like he has, how he learned his unique data science skills, how he landed a job in a different country, and about his experiences creating content and writing a book. This interview was extremely interesting to me as someone who's looking to expand more on the Kaggle platform, and I think it'll also help many of you think differently about creating a body of work and eventually getting a job. Now, on to the interview. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming in, Abhishek. You have such a cool background. As I mentioned before, you're the first 3-time Kaggle Grandmaster and first 4-time Kaggle Grandmaster, which I think is absolutely incredible. In this conversation, I really wanted to get some of your background, how you got interested in data science, learn more about the Kaggle experiences that you've had, and also talk about your work internationally as well. I think that those things for my audience would be really cool for them to learn about you, and could definitely help them as they progress through this field. As I also know, you recently published a book, so I'd love to hear about that experience and what people can learn from that as well towards the end. So the first thing I'd like to ask you is just a more broad question. How did you get started in data science? What did that journey look like for you?
So, yeah, first of all, thank you very much, Ken, and thank you very much for inviting me. I'm a big fan of yours. And
awesome, I'm a fan of yours too. So
that you make. So thanks a lot for having me here. And now to start with my data science journey, it goes back to 2011, I think. At that time, I moved from India to Germany to do my master's. And when I was doing a master's thesis, and same time I was working in Fraunhofer Institute on OCR and microcontrollers. So that was something entirely different from machine learning. And my friends were working in machine learning and natural language processing. Some were working on neural networks. So it was like talking to them motivated me to learn more about machine learning. And I found this website called Kaggle. And I started with a very simple problem. It was a problem for image processing, as I saw it at that time. It it was about emotion recognition. So it was not about image processing, but more about deep neural networks. And at that time, I had no idea about deep neural networks. So I started with simple approaches and I failed. But then I learned winners tackle the problem. And that's how I got more and more interested in this field of data science. So that's like awesome. A gist of it.
Well, one thing I really like is that it seems like you kind of just jumped right in, even kind of to the deep end with some of the deep neural net architectures. And I think that that's something a lot of people can take away, is that it's okay to jump in feet first and fail a little bit. That's how you learn really, really fast. And yeah, so go ahead.
So yeah, that was my approach to start with the problem, because I had some experience with the theory, not a lot. So I just started with the problem. Neural networks was something entirely new to me. And then I saw that, okay, I'm not able to do this thing. So I went back to reading about logistic regression. So I should perfect myself there first and then come to these things.
Awesome. Well, I mean, that is something I find really interesting is that if you don't jump in, if you don't, for example, with the interview process, if you don't do a couple interviews, you won't really know what you need to work on. A lot of people throughout the whole data science pipeline, whether it's learning or whether it's interviewing, they say, Ken, I don't know if I'm ready. Should I interview? Should I start working on projects? And you're not going to know unless you try it and you do it. So
Yeah.
that's a kind of awesome perspective I think that you have there. With Kaggle, what particularly drew you to that platform? Obviously, you're kind of the master of Kaggle. So, what do they do well? What are some of the things that maybe you'd like to see them improve on?
What would I like Kaggle to improve on?
Well, more, what drew you to the platform initially? Obviously,
Okay.
they have a lot of data, but is there?
So the story of Kaggle goes long, long ago. When I think I joined Kaggle when I was still doing my bachelor's, and at that time I had done an internship and I knew what random forest is. So I just knew what random forest is, and a friend of mine came to my room and he told me about this website where I can go and people use random forest a lot, and he thought I know about random forest. So I should go and play around with some problems there. So he made me create account on Kaggle, and after that I saw Kaggle in my masters. So when I was looking for some, I knew that I had created account on some website which has machine learning competitions, um, but I had forgotten the name. So I googled it, machine learning competitions and all, and then I saw Kaggle and I tried to create an account and I already had an account there. So this is the story how I gotten into Kaggle. And then I saw that there are many competitions there, and I took some courses in the university on machine learning and data mining, and I left in the middle. I didn't even finish them, and the only problem was uh, it was all about the theory. It was not about applications. And theory I can also learn from many different resources, and I was more interested in applications because if I have to go to the industry, theory is important, but what's more important than theory is the applications. So you should also know how to apply the theory, right? So, and that's where I found like Kaggle is really useful, and it also gives you like the ability to think outside the box. So you can apply the learnings that you have learned from Kaggle in your industrial problems. So yeah.
That's awesome. There are two things that I really thought were interesting with that. So the first is that one of your friends told you about the website, and that's something that I want to stress to anyone watching this is how important it is to build a community or talk to other people uh, in the data science field. And there's Facebook groups, there's commenting on my YouTube channel. There's Discord servers. There's a bunch of these different things where you can build this community, and that's one way that you can, expand your understanding of the field. You probably wouldn't have been introduced to it initially if your friend hadn't said something, and the word of
True.
mouth is very powerful.
It is, and community helps you a lot. So back then, I used to ask like really stupid questions on Kaggle forums. I have asked like really stupid questions, but people have always been very helpful, and those were like one of the best data scientists on Kaggle at that time. And you're in touch with the community, so you're growing with the community. So from the help of the people in the community, and then when you need help in future, there's this whole community ready to help you. So
Yeah.
yeah, nice with the community. Always be nice with the community.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the thing too, is that if you're active in the community and, someone like myself sees you commenting on a lot of different posts, or we're kind of rolling in the same circles on LinkedIn, for example,
Yeah,
I am so much more likely to respond to a direct message from someone who I've seen before, who I know is not just, asking me for a one-off thing, that's willing to engage and that's willing to share and communicate with a lot of other people. I think that that's something, and a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm not extroverted. I'm introverted," and that's a barrier for them. But if you're typing on a computer, frankly, that really shouldn't matter as much.
Not so
I'm a
much.
big believer that extroversion is something. I don't expect everyone to talk in front of a camera and make videos and do those things. That is an extroverted trait on my part. But at the same time, if you're typing, if you're communicating, um, hopefully you can break away from that paradigm and just talk with other people.
Yeah.
It's I would hope it's less intimidating. Um, so, again, in regards to Kaggle, what are some tips that you have for beginners to get started, aside from just jumping in and going and doing it?
So first of all, learn some theory. So I like Andrew Ng's course a lot. So do that course, and alongside you can start with some kind of problem on Kaggle. So there are many different problems you can start with. You can start with Titanic, which is one of the most popular problem. But don't try to spend like time on it more than a month on that kind of problem, because you would want to achieve a AUC of 1.0 or accuracy of 100% in that problem, and that's not possible. And even if it is, it's not useful. So
Yeah.
if when you see that you have exhausted all the methods that you have learned, move to some other problem.
Yeah, and you've
And
probably overfit the test data set
yeah, you
if you've
overfit
gotten
the test
that
data.
if you've gotten that high an answer.
True. And then you should try to pick up a problem which is like in these premier competitions with prize money, because they have the most serious competitors against you, and you will get to learn a lot from the notebooks or kernels that are shared. You will get to learn a lot from different discussions. You will learn a lot by failing in those competitions. So yeah, be ready to accept that you can fail. You maybe you won't win a medal because it's your first competition. Maybe you will win a medal, and that will boost your confidence. But don't get intimidated by others doing well in the competition. And when the competition is finished, people share their solutions. So try to go through them and implement them on your own. And you can still submit to the competition after the competition ends. And that way you will learn a lot of new things.
That's awesome. I mean, that's something that I really want to highlight again is going through other people's work who are
Yeah.
maybe a step or a couple steps further than you. That's how you really, push the boundaries, right? If I'm going and I'm just working on projects completely independently, I'm never going to really expand beyond the techniques that I know because I haven't seen how it not should be done, but how someone more advanced or what a better solution looks like. So even if you're like, oh, I'm just reviewing this, I'm copying this, I'm not really learning it, that's not true. The more you see other people's solutions that are really good, the more you build intuition around the field. And the
Yeah.
intuition, I think, is what the most important thing is. I mean, I can just Google, or I can go to Stack Overflow, or I can look at the docs for any of these things to implement them. Understanding which one to use or what tweaks to it could produce better results. That's
True.
what the real data science skill is about, and you
That's
build
very
it.
important. So
Yeah.
learning from others' work is very important, and the way you should learn is not to copy paste. So go through the code. If they have shared some code, if they have shared some discussion on how they approach the problem, just read it and try to implement it on your own. So if you start copy pasting these things, then it's going to be very difficult for you to learn, because then you won't understand what's going on.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's one thing I don't think I ever talked about, but one thing that I really do when I'm trying to learn a new technique is I'll just find new data and I'll try
Yeah.
to apply the same algorithm I saw someone else using on a different data set. Because then you have to change the parameters, then you
Yes.
have to maybe change how the data is structured to send it through the algorithm. And you can't copy and paste because it won't work in that case. And so you have to do a very little amount of adjustments,
Yeah.
but you really start to see how it works because it's not the exact same. Um, sorry. So one thing I think your book probably covers this quite a bit as well is when you see a new Kaggle competition starting, how do you approach that? Do you have a process for going through it? What are your thoughts when you see something like this coming up?
So there is a difference between how I approach it now and how I used to approach it.
Well, I'd love to hear
Before.
about both because I think
So
that growth is really important.
yeah, I mean, before I invested quite a lot of time doing explorations and looking at the data. Nowadays, I have gained some experience on what kind of model should work and what kind of pre-processing, post-processing you should use for this type of problem. So just by looking at the data once and not spending way too much time there, I am able to figure out different kinds of models and algorithms that I would like to use and try to build a pipeline first. So one thing that has not changed from like a few years ago and now is I always start with very simple models and I always create a benchmark. So that's my benchmark, my own benchmark, and I would like to beat that benchmark with every kind of improvement in the model that I'm making or every kind of improvement in the pre-processing. So I do do some EDA and stuff. It depends on what kind of problem you have. If I have like tabular data, then I would spend some time doing exploration. If I have text data, then these days BERT works. So it's like that. If I have images, so what kind of is it classification or segmentation problem, and depending on that, I would try different models, and then once I have my benchmark done, I will start going a bit more deeper to the in the problem.
Awesome. Well, I really like that. I think that's something I always recommend. I think I did that in my in the just kind of light tutorial I did for the Titanic data set. I think it's really important for most regression problems. I've always benchmarked with a very simple multiple linear regression. For most classification problems, I prefer naive Bayes to benchmark. Again, you're never going to get the best results with those, or you're usually not going to, but it gives you something to base your performance off of. And
Yeah.
one thing I also like about Kaggle is you can benchmark the other direction too, right? You can see what the best is and see how close you're getting, and that, or the best performance to date is. And I think that's really cool because you can see what people are capable of, what other people are doing, and that gives you a range to say, hey, if I'm within 10% of the best answer, I must be doing something really good. And
Yeah.
that's not something you can get in most other problems, which is really, really exciting.
No, you cannot. And you should always try to keep track of your experiments. So what have you done in the past? And there is also okay, you mentioned my book, that's why I'm saying this. So there's also a chapter in my book about natural language processing, and there I show there are basic models like TF-IDF and logistic regression. Then you have models like LSTMs, right? And then you have the new transformer-based models. And I try to show how much you improve given a metric from going from simple TF-IDF logistic regression to LSTM to BERT-based models, and how much time it takes to train. So Kaggle is okay. So you will try to train large models to gain that last 0.0001%, right? But if you plan to apply this in industry, you also have to think that sometimes simple models are good.
Yeah.
And that's how you should also work in Kaggle. You should always start with something simple, build a baseline, and then improve on that.
Yeah, well, I really like what you said about industry. So one thing I don't think people realize is that the performance that you look at in industry is a function of time, so how long it takes you to build it, performance of the model, so how accurate it is, and then also how consistent it is. And those are three things you're battling in every problem, and you want to optimize a combination of those three things. If you have a model that takes like days to train and you need to retrain it every other day, even if it produces incredible results, you're not going to use it because it takes longer to train than how often you actually need to re-implement it. And so it's one of these things where that's how I think Kaggle is incredible, but there might be this over focus on optimization. If you're looking to get a job when you're doing these projects, doing something like just like what you said, where you're showing how the different models perform and perhaps what the constraints are of some of these things is really important.
It is indeed.
Awesome. And so I think I'm going to be really direct here. How did you become the first 3-time and 4-time Kaggle Grandmaster? I
Oh,
think to narrow it down a little bit, I think something that would be really interesting to people is like time commitment, for example,
hmm.
or how many competitions you felt like you had to answer, or how often you felt you had to brush up your skills and contribute to the community.
So s- some, I think 3 4 years ago, there were no categories like Grandmaster. I don't even remember what kind of categories were there. I think there was master level. So when they introduced the new categories, I automatically became competitions grandmaster. So I was satisfying all the criteria that they had. And the most difficult one is having a solo gold medal. So that's like one of the most difficult ones. So I had all those things, and I was competition grandmaster then. Then I was off Kaggle for a while, and I was focusing on my job and all the other things in life. And then I thought it's high time, because my rank had dropped from I had a world rank of 3, and it dropped to 180. So I was like, I should go back to Kaggle now, and so I started, and I saw like, okay, there is one person who is grandmaster in 2, and I think I should be grandmaster in all of them. So I always like to share kernels. So before there were kernels on Kaggle, I would share it on discussions and attach a Python script, and I always used to call it beating the benchmark. So if you search for beating the benchmark, you will find a lot of scripts from me. So I used to do that, so I continued doing it, and that also creates discussions. So people ask question, you answer question, and people like your answer, so they upvote or they downvote if they don't like it. And that's how like I became 3x grandmaster. And 4 months after that, Kaggle started a new category. So for data sets, and it was the same thing. I had some data sets shared before this new category was created. So I got some points for that, and then I shared data sets related to the ongoing competitions. So like if you have image competitions of image size, like which is 1024x 1024, so that's those images are maybe very huge for some people, and they won't be able to download the full data set. So you can provide a resized version of those images, like 256x 256, something like that, and then people will be able to download it, and they're thankful to you, so they upvote your data set. And that's how I got the fourth category.
Interesting. Well, so that's something I've heard from a couple people is that, you know, contributing to communities is often not as hard as you think, right? I mean, you can take something that's already existing and, effectively reshape it so that it's more usable to other people.
Yeah.
Same thing with contributing to open source GitHub repos. If you find a spelling error, for example, I think I got this from Krishnak. If you find a spelling error, you can go in and make the changes there. You can merge it, whatever it is, and you're a contributor, right? You
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 are, yeah.
you've made an impact, and even if it's a small change, even if it's like a wording change, in my book, an employer's book, that still counts. And
Yeah.
um, and a lot of people, they're like, oh no, that's so hard. I have to be an expert to contribute to these things. That's really not the case. And I think that that's a really, really important point that you bring up there is that, hey, just make something that's useful to other people. It doesn't have to be that difficult.
Yeah, and you just need to take care of you do it in the right way. That's it. So like you don't like copy paste somebody else's
Exactly,
code.
exactly. I made a whole video on that, and I'll link
That's
that about the plagiarism stuff.
and,
So,
and one more thing, since you talked about GitHub and contribution, so I think it's also very important. Like if you're contributing to documentation of some libraries, it's very useful to the community,
yeah,
because you are building up documentation, so which thousands of people are going to read.
yeah. Something that I always love seeing in documentation is examples, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you can add examples to documentation. That'll really help people, right?
that would really help. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean that's another way. You don't have to know anything about the underlying infrastructure. If you can implement it, you can provide an example. You can have a feature tuning example. You can have some of these things, that right there is creating value, and everyone is grateful for those types of
Yeah,
things.
yeah, definitely.
So let's move on. I'd love to hear more about your actual work experience and how you landed your first international job as a data scientist. I'd love to, that story. I get asked so much about, okay, I'm living in India. How do I get a job in Europe? How do I get a job in the United States? What's your story here?
Yeah, I got a job in Europe because I came for masters in Europe. So that's like a thing. So if you come for masters, you will probably find something good. If you don't find anything, then you can always go back and find something there. So um, I got my first job because of Kaggle.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah, it is. So at that time, data science was pretty new, and people were hiring, but nobody likes to hire freshers, right? So, and all the time, freshers have this question: what should we do to get hired? And that's always going to be a problem. And the only thing that you can do is you build your portfolio. So I started applying. I had a lot of rejections. I think I used to apply for 10 jobs a day, and I would get rejections over and over again. And then there was a company which invited me for an interview, and they were also like quite interested in my Kaggle profile and what I'm doing there. So I prepared before going to the interview. I prepared for everything. So it was like one day on site, and they would give me a data set to play with. So I prepared all the pipelines, all kinds of pipelines you can imagine. And so like if I get text data or if I get these categorical variables with text data, what should I do? So I planned everything and then I went there. So I was able to solve the problem. And uh, all the credit for building the portfolio goes to Kaggle, because that's where I learned how to deal with text data, how to deal with categories, how to deal with images. So all these kind of different kinds of problems. And
That's
that was the first job. And yeah, it was pretty difficult. I even applied for all kinds of jobs.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's interesting even for someone like yourself who has such an awesome skill set, who has such an awesome portfolio. It is still hard, and this is, a lot of people say, "Oh, the market's saturated now," but back then it was still hard even before it was quote unquote saturated. So, I don't with my videos with all this stuff, I don't want to give anyone the idea that breaking into this field is easy. I do want to say that it is doable if you're willing to put in the time and effort to build your portfolio, to network, to do these things.
True.
There's such a powerful element around building a portfolio, because as data science evolves, hopefully it's moving so much more towards them looking and saying, hey, what has this person done and what can they do for our company, rather than some less objective, some less objective benchmarks. So when it was starting out, you basically had to have a master's or PhD to break into the field, because they didn't know how. They say, oh, we need a data scientist. How do we evaluate them? How do we know if they're skilled? Lowest hanging fruit is master's or PhD, right?
Exactly.
But now things like Kaggle, things like GitHub, having a portfolio, those are really easy ways now, especially with Kaggle, their ranking system, to say, okay, this person might be qualified enough for us to bring in. You know, having your work out there, I've talked to now 2 people who have had their work, just projects they were doing in their own free time, published in the newspaper or on the news, right? You never know what happens if you just put your stuff out there, if you work on these projects, because if you think it's interesting, someone else will probably also think it's interesting. So I get really excited about this topic. I love the project stuff, and I think it's so cool that these have helped you land your first job.
I think you should keep on doing that anyways. So even after you get your first job, you should work on keep working on your portfolio. And I would also like to mention that there's not no like there is no secret sauce. There is no recipe of becoming a data scientist. It's just your hard work and determination. And once you lose hope, then just forget about it. So you have to, because this field is growing so fast and there's so many different things coming in every day, and you have to keep yourself updated, and you have to continue working on different projects. So pick up something and try to work on it, and then share it with the world. So share it on your GitHub, write blog posts about it, share it on Reddit. So these kind of channels, or share it on Twitter or LinkedIn. So just show it to the world, and then maybe people will pick it up.
Yeah.
Somebody will pick it up if your project is good enough.
Well, there's zero chance anyone picks it up if you don't put it out there. You know, no
Exactly.
one's gonna divine into your local computer and find your no hacker's gonna hack your local computer and find this cool project and share it for you. So,
Exactly.
I love that you stress how important that element is. So you said, so one way I know is to do a master's degree in another country and find work from there. I think I talked to Code Basics, and another way is to work with a large multinational corporation and try and transfer to a branch in a different country. Are there any other ways? I mean, obvious to kind of break into international markets that you're familiar with.
So I can talk a little bit about India. So if you're coming from India, you can apply for jobs everywhere, and this is like also one of the things people are like, I don't know why they're reluctant to apply, and I don't know if the job will come walking to them. So you have to keep on applying to jobs, and I've seen like getting a visa in Europe. It's the situation has improved quite a lot over several years, and there are so many startup companies in Germany which are ready to hire people from different countries. They are looking for people, but if you're not applying, then nobody can help you. And so this is one thing, and you can also, like like you said, if you're working in a multinational company, and then they will probably send you for some years. So that's also one option, but then you will be bound to work with that company for some years.
Yeah. Very cool. So kind of going on with that, with our whole theme here, Kaggle, data science in general, you've touched on a lot, obviously getting your hands dirty, doing projects. Do you have any additional tips for someone who's looking to break either into Kaggle or data science domain? Kaggle for me is particularly interesting. Obviously, I'm trying to do more projects there. I'm trying to expand there. Anything useful for viewers as well as secretly myself is always valuable.
So don't focus on too many competitions at once. Just pick one problem and focus on that. There are many. If you look at Kaggle anytime you look in, there are many different kinds of competition going on. So choose what you want to learn, even if it's new to you, and try to invest at least 1 hour a day looking into the problem or coding, and try to. I also like encourage people to code in a good manner. So try to code in such a way that you have to spend only like maybe a month or less coding the framework, and the rest 2 months you can spend on optimizing stuff, like changing pre-processing or changing something in the pipeline, or changing the models, or optimizing parameters, these kind of things. Then you don't have to make a lot of changes in the code, and it would also be easy if you are planning to team up with someone. So that's these are the few things, and the most important thing is uh, don't get disappointed, even if even if you are scoring bad, or your score is not improving, and you see like a lot of people are improving in front of you. Don't get disappointed and never give up. So these are like the two most important things.
Awesome. Well, those are the main questions I had. This was absolutely incredible. I recommend that anyone follow you on Twitter and YouTube. I'll link both of those above and below, probably in the first pin comment. I'd love for you to talk a bit more about your book, talk about any of the projects that you're personally working on. I think that the community here would be very interested in those as well.
Yeah, sure. I recently launched this book. I don't know if you can see it. So it's called Approaching Almost Any Machine Learning Problem. And I consider this book to be quite different from other books. So first of all, I don't spend the first 10 pages talking about the book. I just jump right into it. So I have a page for thanking people who have helped me. And then I jump right into the content. And I have structured it in such a way, like you start with setting up your working environment, and then I talk a little bit about supervised and supervised learning. I talk about cross-validation, some evaluation metrics. Then I talk about how you should try to arrange your machine learning projects, which I think is very important. And then you have the usual chapters on categorical variables and feature engineering, feature selection, hyperparameter optimization. I talk about image classification and segmentation, a little bit about natural language processing. I can write a book on natural language processing. I talk about ensembling and stacking because a lot of people expect me to talk about it. And some I talk a little bit about Docker. So this is like more or less the contents of the book, but I've designed it in such a way, like if you don't code along with the book, then you shouldn't buy the book. So it's very code heavy book. There's not a lot of mathematics, and I have a lot of focus on code, and also focused on how you can implement these things, how you can build pipeline for categorical variables, let's say, or pipeline for tackling image problems, how you can implement neural networks. So I have these things, but it's so code heavy. Some people even ask me to make a GitHub repo instead of writing a book. So I decided not to do that. So you have to code along. So if you want to like use the book in the best manner, best way possible, you have to code along with the book.
Awesome.
So
Well,
yeah.
I will. I'll give it a read. I'll code along and see what it looks like. So I'll give you any feedback I have. I'm pretty excited about that. The pipelines. That's something I've really been meaning to work on and improve this year. I think that for reproducibility, for actually getting the best results, the more infrastructure you have, the better. And I'm very much like, let's get to the solution type of guy. So that's always an area that I can improve on. And for anyone watching, that's an area that is really important in the job process. People care more about reproducibility and how you document your work than they care about your results sometimes, right? Because you're going to be working with other people in the real world, and collaborating and making your code reusable is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing.
True.
So definitely, if you guys are interested, I'll link to his book as well. Thank you so much for coming in. This was absolutely awesome. I learned a lot about Kaggle. I learned about a lot about your experience as well, and hopefully we can do something similar to this in the future.
Definitely, and thank you very much for inviting me. And it has been a pleasure.